Welcome to the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs, the busiest committee in the Nevada State Legislature. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblyman Carter.
Present.
Assemblyman DeLong.
Present.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblyman Gurr.
Here.
Assemblyman Hibbets.
Here.
Assemblyman Koenig.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblyman Nguyen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Taylor. Assemblywoman Thomas. Chair Torres.
Welcome to the audience in Carson City, those joining us by video conference in Las Vegas, and those listening over the internet. We really appreciate you being here. We know that everyone is busy and has a lot of things to do, so we really appreciate you all joining us today. A couple reminders. Please remember to silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize background noise. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name, spell your name, and state your affiliation, if any, for the record. Then turn the microphone off each time you're done speaking. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we may not agree with another person's position. Handouts should have already been provided to our committee staff. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents, and while it might appear that they're busy, please note that they're definitely listening, and this is not a sign of disrespect or inattention. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. Each person will be limited to 2 minutes. In addition, the public may submit written testimony to the committee up to 24 hours after the hearing. All right, so we definitely have a busy day in the hardest working committee in the Nevada State Legislature. I know we've had a very busy week in our committee already, and I know it's just beginning. So we will go ahead and open the hearing at this time on AB 376.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm very excited to present today in Government Affairs. I am Elaine Marzola, representing the beautiful Assembly District 21 in Clark County. Today I'm here to co-present Assembly Bill 376 with our State Treasurer, Zach Conine. Speaker Yeager and I have worked closely with the State Treasurer to brainstorm ways to recruit and retain state employees. And I'm really excited about several pieces of legislation this session: furlough reimbursements, retention bonuses, salary increases, and the paid family leave. State Treasurer Conine is prepared to provide an overview of the bill and the amendment, which I support as it widens the scope of the bill to include unclassified and non-classified employees. With your permission, Chair, I would like to turn the presentation over to State Treasurer Conine.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Just when you thought you had seen the last of the Treasurer for this session, here we are. For the record, I'm Treasurer Zach Conine. It's my pleasure to be here this morning, along with Assemblywoman Marzola, to present Assembly Bill 376. Broadly, Assembly Bill 376 creates a mechanism by which Nevada state employees are offered the ability to take paid family leave. Our offices work closely with Speaker Yeager and the Assemblywoman on the creation of this bill, and we really appreciate their willingness to work with us on this important issue. By way of background, the idea for this bill stemmed from a number of internal conversations the Treasury has had during the interim on how to recruit and retain our employees. We are endeavoring, if you will, to put the human back in human resources. For us, that means understanding the limitations provided to us by existing state personnel rules, which provide a structure and guardrails on our flexibility. For example, we know the lack of flexibility of, say, a multinational corporation that can offer all employees unlimited PTO or sign-on bonuses. While state rules limit us, it also forces us to think creatively and strategically on ways we can improve the experience for our staff, not only as employees of a government agency, but as individuals and residents of our state. As public servants, we owe our constituents a certain standard of care, so why should we provide a lesser standard for our own staff? For example, in the Treasury, we recently implemented a babies in the workplace policy, which allows parents to bring their infants into the STO office up to 6 months of age, and we recognize how important and foundational those first few months of life are. And I'd just like to take a moment to let the committee know that today is Diamond's first hearing in the legislative building. Diamond and her mother, Etzel, are integral parts of the state treasury team. And yes, we brought a baby. We believe this bill furthers that change by allowing the state to start redefining what it means to be a state employee and what benefits come with such a title. Paid family leave is one step in what we hope is many towards increasing these opportunities. We are continually looking for ways to improve the experience we offer to staff and look forward to working on more of these issues in the future. Moving into the bill, if I may, Chair, the bill is fairly straightforward. So rather than go section by section, I'll address the bill as a whole. The bill amends NRS 284, which governs the state personnel system, by adding a new section. The new section was modeled after a similar law in California and creates a provision by which a state employee may take up to 8 weeks of leave at 50% pay to bond with a newborn or adopted child, to recover or receive treatment from a serious illness, to care for an ill family member, or in the event of immediate family member's military deployment. Currently, state employees must use their accrued sick and annual leave or take unpaid leave on FMLA for these circumstances. While FMLA protects an employee's job, it does not allow the employee to continue to collect a paycheck in the event of serious illness or to bond with a new baby, both events of which are the fundamental or some of the most fundamental in an individual's life. I would note the paid leave allowed under this bill is only triggered if the employee has otherwise exhausted most of their sick leave. Employees are allowed to reserve up to 40 hours, 1 week, of sick leave. We included the reserve provision to ensure that employees had some buffer with sick leave should they need it immediately after or before they've exhausted their weeks of family leave. Similarly, paid leave under the bill does not have to be taken consecutively. Rather, an employee, if eligible, is entitled to 8 cumulative 8 weeks each year. Finally, the bill modifies the existing allowances for sick leave to include all of the allowable uses for paid family leave. In other words, if passed, state employees could now use their sick time to bond with a newborn or in the event of a military deployment in the immediate family in order to spend down their accrued sick leave first. I would note for the record, the initial drafting of the bill only included those employees in the classified service of the state. It is our intent to include all state employees, including unclassified and non-classified. To that end, we have drafted a proposed amendment, which you can find on Nellis, which would include all state employees in the bill. That concludes our presentation, but I will end with this. In this market, it is very difficult to retain and recruit employees at the quality that we deeply need in order to do the state's work. And more importantly, when we have individuals that have to leave the service of the state in order to have children, we are losing their voice at the table. Our work in the state treasury is about helping young families invest and prepare for the future. And by this proposal and other things that we've done and hope to do in the future, we're hoping to make sure that they're there to make sure we do that job well. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and thank you, Treasurer Conine. We know that you're obviously a very busy man, and so thank you for making time to join us in Assembly GA today. Members, any questions? I'll begin with Assemblyman Hibbets.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question is, why is this not being addressed in the state employees' collective bargaining like it is in other public employees?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, our intention was to be holistic, and not all state employees are covered under a collective bargaining agreement. We think this is exceptionally important for retention, so we wanted to make sure it was available to both employees that are lucky enough to be part of one of the collective bargaining units, employees who are considering it in the future, employees who aren't in it, and unclassified employees who wouldn't be able to join.
Thank you, and we may have a point of clarification. I believe we're going to need the baby for an exhibit now that you've introduced it.
Definitely a very unique exhibit. It'll be hard to post on a child on Nellis, but we can definitely make an attempt here in the hardest working committee. Assemblywoman Taylor.
Thank you very much. And I was just going to concur with my colleague. I think it's critically important that the public see the exhibits that we have. So let's work that out. My question is, and thank you to my colleague. And to the treasurer for being here. You are definitely hardworking because we have seen you a lot. I mean, nothing personal, but you know. Just you talked a little bit about another state, in particular California, that has this. Do you see anything like this happening in the corporate world? Because I just recognize that we know the recruiting and retention up to 1/3 of our state employees, our positions are vacant. And it used to be back in the day where you might make a little bit less, but the benefits were amazing if you work for the government or in the public sector. And we've slipped away in some of that. So it's good to see we're looking at those things. What can we do to keep ourselves relevant and vital? So I'd like to know if you have any, is it happening in corporate America as well?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, absolutely. And in fact, we think this proposal goes a long way towards that, but it doesn't match what's happening in the corporate world, right? Which includes full paid time off, includes paternity and maternity leave, both paid for employees. I think this moves us closer in that direction, but we're going to have a lot of work to do to catch up and be competitive in the private sector.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Treasurer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, additional questions? Assemblywoman Thomas.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I'm glad that the state is looking at the viability of employees, because it's very important to keep our employees working. But my question has to do with, and you might have gone over it and somehow I missed it because I was looking at baby Jack. But I just want to know whether or not this pertains to not only moms, but dads also. Thank you.
Treasurer Conan, for the record, it absolutely does apply to both moms and dads. We think it's exceptionally important. As the father of 3 children, we had to spend a fair amount of the boys' first year in Elko and Ely and other places campaigning, and we brought them every place we could, and that's real important. And I want to make sure that families have the opportunity to do that if they choose to.
Thank you. Vice Chair Duran.
Good morning, and thank you for this. I think it's well needed. I think everybody deserves to have time off with their family. My question is on the 8 weeks. So if you're on maternity leave, so if you decide to come back after 3 or 4 weeks, then 6 months later you want to take the additional time. Is that what this is saying? 'Cause I think that's what I heard you say.
Treasurer Conan, for the record, we do want to allow for some flexibility. I might phone a friend here. We've got some of our policy experts in the room. Somebody want to nod or come up? She's nodding, so that's a yes, ma'am.
So now on this whole weeks with the FMLA, does that encompass, like, for example, if you have another sick child, do you borrow from the cumulative 8 weeks? Or is there a different bucket for your family? For example, if you take 3 or 4 weeks from maternity leave and then all of a sudden your child or your parent gets sick, do you just have that time together?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I can hear someone coming up from the back to jump in if they need to, but maybe not. It is a single bucket per employee, right? So the employee themselves has that time, and so if they have to use it for bereavement, or they use it for a new child, or they use it because a family member is being deployed, it all comes out of that same bucket. And our intention with mirroring the language on the existing leave was to make sure that those buckets were effectively interchangeable, right? That you could use your paid leave and then move into the 50% that is contemplated in this bill in order to have some flexibility there.
I think it's a great policy that you are creating here. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Nguyen.
Thank you, Chair. This is bring really awesome flashbacks, so thank you both for presenting this. To add to the comment earlier about the corporate benefits, as a former corporate employees, when my firstborn was born on, wow, that's a while back. He's turning 10 this year, so it's been a while. I remember that I had the benefit of taking actually 2 months off as a father, as a new father, and that was really cool, and it was 100% pay. So I know we can't be completely there yet at this point, but, as you know, being a new father and new mother and, all of that stuff, it's busy. You have a lot of busy work, and you're just trying to get adjusted and get your head wrapped around. The last thing you want to worry about is your money coming in, right? And I know not all state employee is going to be in that bracket where they are going to be even okay with that 50%. I know it's better than nothing. Have we thought about even looking at maybe carving out just for the newborn or adopting of a child to be at 100% and the rest at 50%. I'm looking at that just because, there's only going to be a certain segment of your time in your life that kid is coming, hopefully. Not everybody's going to have kids, when they're retiring, but I don't know, I may be speaking out of terms, but that's what I wanted to see, if maybe perhaps that the newborn or adopting of a child has a little bit better financial incentive rather than just a 50% across the board. So thank you.
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I completely agree, right? And I wish we could do everything for every family in the state. I think what we're trying to do by mimicking the language on the sick leave, right, is to allow the use for that time, which is 100%, to start that bonding process. And if the bonding process goes a little bit longer, if there isn't enough sick time, then to continue to allow the employee not just to retain their job, but to still be able to get some money as they go. But I think it's a great suggestion and one we'd love to chat about.
Thank you. Thank you,
Of course.
Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Treasurer and Assemblywoman and Mr. Jimenez for your presentation this morning. I had a question. I think it's more so for our council, but I know you have a definition here for immediate family, but my question really was, so what's the state's definition when it comes to family? And how do we, because this has come up in other hearings too, in many hearings actually this session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. So I think the definition used in this bill is pretty consistent with the definitions used in most other sections of Nevada law. Sometimes we use the within so many degrees of consanguinity definition instead, but I think this definition is a slightly more readable version of that definition.
Awesome, thank you.
Members, any additional questions? Okay, I do have a couple questions myself, just to make sure that I understand the process completely. So I'm wondering if the goal then is you wouldn't be on paid family leave until you have used the other sick leave days that you have that are in excess of the 40 days first. Is that correct? The 40 hours. I apologize, not 40 days, 40 hours.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Eric Jimenez with the Treasurer's Office for the record. The intention of the bill is to utilize sick leave first and in your paid time off first, and then you can go into this bucket. But as you mentioned, that the employee could reserve up to 40 hours of their sick, so they wouldn't have to completely exhaust their sick leave.
Perfect. And then by the conversation that we've had today too, that I understand that they would be given the 8 weeks that they could use. And how long, let's say I have a qualifying life event, how long do I have to use those 8 weeks since I wouldn't have to take them all at once?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Eric Jimenez with the Treasurer's Office for the record. I believe that 8 weeks is within a 12-month period.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question that I have is that, like, how often would you be able to get this leave? Like, let's say that in 1 year, maybe I have a newborn child, and then I also have a family member that has passed away. So how often can I use this leave?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I believe our intention is to be as flexible as possible. So you have 8 weeks. If you use those 8 weeks in 2 life events, that's okay, right? Split evenly. Or if you used 6 weeks for one and 2 weeks for the other, or vice versa, you'd be able to do that.
And then one more question I have regarding the taking care of a serious an individual with a serious illness. I can just think of multiple cases too, though, where an individual might have a family member that is that has a terminal illness that might be sick for an extended period of time. And so, how would this leave be applied in that situation? Would they have 8 weeks total, or, for example, I have a close family friend that has MS, and her husband has been very ill for a number of years. Would that? How often would that time be accrued?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I believe the 8 weeks are on an annual basis, and I'm sure my team will correct me if I'm wrong here, but if the FMLA period expanded longer than a year, there'd be 8 weeks per year to use for this purpose. But obviously, FMLA leave can extend longer than an 8-week period. It just wouldn't be paid.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I think Assemblyman Thomas had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but I think the treasurer actually answered my question, because my question was FMLA. What part does that play into it? Thank you.
And then Assemblyman Hibbets.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the 12-month period that we're talking about, is that calendar year, fiscal year, rolling 12-month, and then also just for the record, FMLA, I believe, is up, federal law says up to 12 weeks. Is that not correct?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, yes, 8 of those weeks would be paid under this, 4 of those weeks wouldn't be. And I believe the period is a rolling period from the employee's hire date as our most. And Mr. Killian, who is a badass, is nodding at me, so we're going to call that an okay. Sorry, Treasurer Conine, for the record, rolling from the date of employment.
Thank you.
You know, Treasurer, I don't know that we have ever gotten the term badass on the record. This might be a legislative first, so congratulations.
Treasurer Conine, for the record, breaking barriers, Madam Chair.
I don't know that it's appropriate enough for the word of the day, though. Off the record, it might be. Members, any additional questions? Senator MacArthur, I know we had a conversation this week earlier in your office, and you had a couple questions, or were they reflected in the questioning here today? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Would you be able to get that on the mic?
What was the question?
It looks like we got all the questions. You didn't have another one?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for clarifying that. I did have one final question. How long does it take to accrue 40 hours?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, I don't actually know that offhand. I'd be curious if staff does.
We can, oh, it looks like somebody might know.
Kirsten Van Rye, Chief of Staff for the Treasurer's Office. For the record, I think it's 1.25 days per month of service.
We're doing some calculations. We'll get that answer to the committee. 4 months. Oh,
3 and change, ma'am.
As someone in the log has this down, thank you. I'm an English teacher, not a math teacher, thank you. All right, so it looks like it takes about 4 months. Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, members, any additional questions? It doesn't appear there are any. At this time, I'll invite anyone wishing to testify in support to AB 376. Please begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Torres and committee members. For the record, my name is Caitlin Gatchalian, Caitlin Gatchalian, and I'm the Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association Nevada Division. On behalf of the American Heart Association, I would like to express our support for AB 376. The American Heart Association supports policies that ensures state employees have access to paid family and medical leave programs that provide sufficient paid time off to manage significant personal or family life events and needs. The American Heart Association understands that people need sufficient time to recover from serious medical conditions without worrying about covering expenses. Paid leave policies lead to healthier babies and birthing parents. The United States currently has no guaranteed paid family and medical leave, and access to paid family and medical leave is lowest amongst workers who need it most. Far too many people are forced to sacrifice their savings or lose their jobs altogether when they need time to care for themselves or their families. The American Heart Association supports AB 376 because we believe that state workers deserve to savor the joys and weather the inevitable crises that life delivers without worrying about how to pay the bills. Thank you for your consideration.
Hello, committee. Elise Monroy Marsala today here on behalf of the Nevada Public Health Association. A recent article published by the American Journal for Public Health found that paid family leave is associated with a number of positive impacts for new families, including improved postpartum outcomes for mom, improved mental health for mom and dad. It's also linked to increased rates of breastfeeding and immunization. I also want to take the time today to tell you my own family leave story. In a past life, I had a job where I was guaranteed paid family leave, and a family member very close to me fell very sick with a traumatic illness. I was able to sit with them in the ICU and hold their hand, brush their hair, and walk them through the discharge planning process without a single worry that my paycheck wasn't going to come and that my bills weren't going to be covered. And I was able to get them to every post-operative doctor appointment, and I didn't have to think about my job. And then when the 12 weeks was up, I went back to work, and I was so excited because I got to spend 12 weeks caring for my family member. And I was excited to jump back into life. And I tell you that on behalf of the Public Health Association because we know that implementing policies that promote resilience and public health helps us have a stronger economy. So thank you.
Hello, Vanessa Dunn with Bells and Case Government Affairs, VANESSADUNN, and I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Psychiatric Association, also known as NPA, and they are in support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in support of AB 376? I don't see anyone. BPS, is there anyone on the line?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. And let it be reflected, I don't see anybody in Las Vegas at the time. At this time, I'll invite anyone wishing to testify in opposition to AB 376. Don't see anyone here in Carson City. Don't see anyone in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in opposition to AB 376?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite anyone wishing to testify neutral to AB 376. I don't see anyone here in Carson City. One moment. It appears we have a change of heart. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Chris Daly, typically with the Nevada State Education Association, but just speaking on my own on this item as NSA has not taken a position on this issue. In 2002, in a previous life, I was a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, authored a charter amendment to extend 12 weeks of paid family leave to all San Francisco employees. It's been a wildly popular program, which has very much helped with new parents who are employees in San Francisco, along with recruitment and retention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Daly, from your personal capacity. Is there anyone else wishing to testify neutral today? I don't see anyone here in Carson City. BPS, is there anyone on the line?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there is no callers choosing to testify in neutral at this time.
All right, I'll go ahead and invite the Assemblywoman back for any closing remarks. And the treasurer. Looks like the exhibit is going to be with us today as well. Please make sure her name is reflected on the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I know your committee is very busy, so I will make this short.
Your name for the record.
Elaine Marzola for the record, along with Diamond for the record. I just want to thank you and the committee members for listening to AB 376 today. This, of course, is one of the reasons that the bill is so important to the state of Nevada, and we would appreciate your support.
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I'll echo everything that the Assemblywoman said, say thank you very much for having us today, and tell us that if we can get these things right, we can get the right employees in the state, we can move the state forward, not just for them, but for everybody else. So thank you for the consideration today, and we are going to remove the baby from the committee hearing before anything happens, because it's a baby.
Thank you, and I thank you for those closing remarks. I could tell that even Assemblyman MacArthur couldn't help but smile. Thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 376. 1 minute recess.
Thank you. We will now be hearing Assembly Bill AB 423, and this is governing meetings on a board of trustees of a school district, and we have our own Chairperson Torres presenting. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duran and committee members for the hardest working and busiest committee in the Nevada State Legislature. For the record, I am Assemblyman Selena Torres, and I proudly represent Assembly District 3 in the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada. Today, I'm pleased to present AB 423. The bill revises provisions governing meetings of a board of trustees of a school district. Open meeting laws are commonly referred to as sunshine laws. The idea behind such laws is that public bodies are not meeting on important issues impacting their constituents in the middle of the night behind closed doors. In recent years, school board meetings have become increasingly contentious, attracting a lot of public comment, and meetings often continue well into the next morning. Oftentimes, tempers are hot and patience is thin late into the night, and that is not a recipe for good education policy. Many parents bring their children to these meetings where they are sometimes sleeping on the floor during the final hours of the meeting. This needs to stop. The legislature needs to provide additional guardrails to keep these meetings safe, and that's why I'm presenting AB 423 today. This will be one of our quickest hearings of the legislative cycle. So I'm going to next just kind of quickly walk through the bill. There are only two sections of AB 423. Subsection 6 of Section 1 prohibits the Board of Trustees from taking any action at a regular meeting or special meeting after 11:59 on the day of the meeting and before 8 a.m. of the following day. Subsection 7 of Section 1 authorizes but does not require a Board of Trustees to restrict public comment at a regular meeting or special meeting if the public comment meets one or both of the following criteria. If it is a topic that is not relevant to or within the authority of the Board of Trustees, or if it's willfully disruptive of the meeting by being slanderous or offensive. Finally, Section 2 makes the bill effective on July 1st of 2023. While this is a policy committee, I would like to note that the fiscal notes submitted show no fiscal impact. At this time, before I close, I do want to state that, I've had the opportunity to speak with a couple different stakeholders that would be interested in making sure that, it doesn't occur during the school day. I think that's a reasonable request and one that we can definitely entertain and a conversation that we can continue to have. But at this time, I'll welcome your support of AB 423.
Questions? Okay, I have Assemblywoman Taylor, then Koenig. Anybody else? Thomas? Okay, we'll go in that order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing this. And we have had a chance to discuss this, so thank you. And really, I think overall, I'm supportive of the bill. One of the things that you mentioned that I wanted to see if it was still something you were still considering is that in the case of an emergency, such as in Washoe at least, that experience, and probably other places in the state, when we were dealing with the COVID issues, that's when meetings, primarily the reason when meetings started going really deep, deeper into the night than usual. We went after midnight, but those were things we had to cover and couldn't delay. So would you share kind of your thinking along those lines?
Thank you, Assemblyman Taylor, Assemblyman Selena Torres, for the record. And that's definitely something I would consider. I know we had a conversation, but unfortunately I did not have time to prepare an amendment ahead of this hearing. But I think that would be something that we should consider, is making sure that there is an exemption for cases of emergency when the state of emergency impacts that individual school district, making sure, just because there's an emergency in Northern Nevada doesn't mean that the Southern Nevada School Board should have that same exemption, but making it very clear in that language, I think, is something that we could introduce. Thank you.
If I may follow up, Madam Chair. Thank you. And then just and maybe we should have some conversation about during the school day. Sometimes there are times when school board meetings, at least in Washoe, the only experience I have, right, starts like at 2 o'clock, and some schools may not get out until 2:30. Or if it's like in the search process, sometimes the meetings might start at noon because we're interviewing superintendent candidates or school board appointed candidates. So that may be some consideration in there. But I agree with the concept in that, is that people, teachers, can, and even if students want to come to the meetings, they can be a part of it. So it's probably something we need to play with a little bit.
Assemblyman Torres, for the record, I definitely think it's a conversation that I really had, honestly, like 2 minutes before this hearing.
Okay.
And one that I think makes sense. I think something too, you could put in, like, it has to be within 24 hours of the start time of the initial meeting or the previous meeting. But ultimately, they would just have to schedule, I imagine. You would have to actually plan for a meeting. I mean, all of you probably are aware that, as chair of this committee, I have the privilege to schedule meetings. And I make sure that, if we're going to have till 11 o'clock because we have floor, that we have a meeting that ends at 11 o'clock. So, I do think that similarly, other public bodies should be planning appropriately.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, Assemblyman Koenig, sorry.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm going to talk a little bit, put on my school board hat. I was on the school board for 12 years, and I think in the 12 years we had 3 meetings that went past midnight, one of them till 2 o'clock. It's a lot easier to control things here in Carson City than it is out there because we're not held accountable to the open meeting law. So, we had, one of them was, it was over whether or not to implement uniforms in our district. For some reason, that drew a whole gymnasium full of parents on both sides of the situation. Here you can say, I'm going to allot 20 minutes in support, 20 minutes against, 20 minutes neutral. Out there is no neutral, but you have to hear every single person that shows up. So we had to listen to every single person that wanted to speak in that gymnasium with 500 people. And so it was well after midnight before we got done in that situation. My one concern is, and question, this is probably for legal, is you're saying you could vote the next morning at 8 o'clock. I think that might be a separate meeting that you might have to re-agendize for. And to agendize for that, you've got to give 3 days out. So if you can't vote on that topic at the time, I guess potentially you get around it by, if you think you have a contentious issue, you could 3 days before the first meeting, schedule another meeting for 8 o'clock the next morning, and then if you don't use it, then that's fine. But sometimes you potentially are going to get an unforeseen situation, and then you would have to repost and re-agendize another meeting 3 days down the road. And so you have all these excited people, and it's 12:01, you're like, sorry, we'll vote on it in 3 days, which then you have to hear it all over again. Then you have to open it again. So my question is, would you have to re-agendize that, or could you potentially do it 8 o'clock the next morning?
We will ask Asher, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. So I think the bill as written would leave that to the discretion of the school board. The bill does not require that the meeting be adjourned and a new meeting be scheduled. The meeting just requires that no action be taken until 8 a.m. of the following calendar day. So if the public body decided to recess during that period of time before taking action, so it was still the same meeting, then no new meeting would need to be agendized. If the public body decided to adjourn, then the public body would need to wait at least 3 days to agendize a new meeting to convene and then take a vote. So it would be left to the discretion of the public body as to whether it wants to recess or adjourn, and that would have an impact on when the vote could then happen.
Thank you. I just think there probably would need to be a little bit of training to school boards that let them know that's an option. In 12 years on the board, I never knew to adjourn. I think when we were done, we closed and we'd have to start again. But if adjourning is acceptable and allowed under, you can go recess for 8 hours and come back.
Assemblyman Slayton, choice for the record. So yes, so we could go to recess. So you could start the meeting, hold your public comment, hear it, and then you would have to recess and pick up the meeting where you left off on whatever agenda item you left off on the following day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate that clarification from legal on the record, just so that everybody kind of understands that intent of the legislation. And, in the conversation, I forget, that was a very long remark, Assemblyman Koenig, and I did not write down exactly my response. But, I definitely think that, allowing for that recess allows for the public to participate. Additionally, I wanted to hit on the public comment portion of it. And I think it's interesting because open meeting law does grant for individuals, in my conversation with legal ahead of this hearing, open meeting law grants for public bodies to allow for public comment either on each agenda item or at the beginning and end of the meeting. And that is at the discretion of that public body. And so I think that, I trust that, local governments could make the appropriate decision on whether or not they're going to public comment for every single agenda item or whether or not they're going to do so at the beginning and the end of the meeting.
Okay, we have Assemblywoman Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I guess my question will not be popular. And it actually, you know, I've heard in government affairs several bills that I feel are overreaching by the state. And I think that this is one of those bills that could be, you know, when I hear about the school board having discretion, when I hear that, you know, to run their meetings, they can recess. I think that those are options that perhaps the trustees, you know, I would assume that they know and that they have legal, you know, advising them that what they can do. But to me, for the state to tell the school board how to run their meetings, when to run their meetings, that's overreach.
Assemblyman Torres, I would respectfully, for the record, I would respectfully disagree because we do that exact thing. That's what open meeting law is. We tell public bodies how they can operate. And, you know, when I imagine that somebody will come up here in opposition and state, you know, well, you know, the legislature does it. The legislature is the only body that has 120 days to have policy. School boards can make policy year round. And so I think, you know, it's critical for us to have this conversation because I think our school boards have gotten out of hand. I mean, the fact that we're watching school board meetings and seeing votes at 3 a.m. is obnoxious to me. That's not open meeting. That's not allowing for public participation. That's not allowing for individuals to engage with democracy. And so I think, you know, as representatives of this legislature and of this body, we have the responsibility to protect democracy and we have the responsibility to protect civic engagement. And I think that this bill does exactly that.
Thank you. We have Assemblyman Hibbets.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Chair, for the presentation. My question revolves around Section 1, Subsection 7. A makes sense to me because we do that here. You know, you can't come up and just start talking about something that has nothing to do with what we do. But B concerns me because obviously slanderous there's a legal definition of, but who decides what is offensive?
Thank you, Assemblyman Torres, for the record. So my understanding from your question was that you're concerned with specifically the portion of it that says slanderous or offensive, but I think it's important to note that that is only if it is also willfully disruptive. So it would have to meet both criterion. But I actually believe that's in other places in our right now too. So this is just making it very clear that it's applicable to school board, but this is currently in other parts of the NRS regarding public comment.
Can I get clarification from legal on that?
Yes, if you're ready, or do you need a minute?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. So yes, there's obviously this all boils down to a First Amendment issue. And the crux of the issue under the First Amendment is that public bodies have the power to control the time, place, and manner of public comment that occurs before the bodies. And the chair of a public body has the authority to ensure that the proceedings of the body are orderly. So the crux of this provision in this bill is that it ties to being willfully disruptive of the meeting. Public bodies are not required to allow comment that is willfully disruptive. So whether it's willfully disruptive due to being slanderous or willfully disruptive due to being offensive, it's the fact that it's willfully disruptive that enables the public body under the First Amendment to prohibit the comment for the sake of the order of the meeting.
Thank you. And thank you, Vice Chair and Chair.
Thank you. And Assemblyman Torres, for the record, I'll also note that I did work with the ACLU on this language too to make sure that it was something that kind of met their standards. And I know obviously that they have taken stances on making sure that we protect that First Amendment right, and they felt confident in my conversations with them upon the receiving the language. They felt confident that this language continued to allow them to do that.
Okay, I think we still have one more question from Assemblyman DeLong.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Appreciate the presentation, Chair. Wanted to follow up on the questioning my colleague had with you regarding a provision for emergency situations. Since we're talking about school boards, just wanting to know, what are you thinking about with regards to how you would define an emergency situation? I mean, obviously we've got what the governor does, but that's a statewide issue. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Assemblyman Torres, for the record, I think I was kind of considering like an emergency issue as declared by the governor because that's what the only time there would be like emergency really situations. Like I'm thinking about like COVID, right? Like school boards needed to act fast and make regulations and policies to respond to, I mean, a pandemic and the shutdown of our schools. And this would allow for them to continue to meet and make those. But I'm happy for more feedback on that. This is definitely a living
provides the clarity I
document.
want. Thank you.
Perfect. Do we have any more questions? Okay, with that, we will have support for AB 423. So anyone in Carson City that has support, please come up, state your name, and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the committee. Paul Marakin with the Vegas Chamber. First Chamber would like to thank Assemblyman Torres for bringing the bill forward. We believe that common sense governance in this bill makes sense for our community. It's important for our community to have faith and transparency in their school board meetings and so forth. And as you've heard, this bill will allow community members to be engaged, parents, students, to be engaged in the Clark County School District and school districts throughout the state on these board meetings. Many times before COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, school board meetings in Clark County can go easily past midnight. You know, they're discussing curriculum issues, they're discussing evaluations, they're discussing collective bargaining agreements. And the reality is it's hard for the public to be engaged at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I've seen myself, many times, students sitting there wanting to participate in democracy. And they can't stay up that late because they have classes starting next morning at 7 a.m. Parents have to take them there. Faculty can't stay. Student support services have to go home to rest and get ready for the next school day. So I think there is a genuine concern about engagement. Now, the school district, of course, has many issues that they have to address, and the board is trying, of course, their best to address those issues. But I think there is a genuine concern about those meetings going past midnight, and we believe it's a good governance model. And I think someone brought an excellent point. This body was restricted by 120 days. This would apply to regular school board meetings. They're posted, of course, 3 days in advance. There are multiple meetings every month. There's work sessions the school board has in Clark County. So again, we think this makes sense for regularly scheduled meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in support of AB 423 in Carson? I see nobody. I see nobody in Las Vegas. Broadcast, do we have anybody on the phone lines?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to provide support testimony at this time.
Thank you. Now we will go into opposition. Do we have anyone in Carson City for opposition of AB 423? Please come forward. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. Here in the friendliest possible opposition to Assembly Bill 423, we do very much appreciate the intent of this bill. As many of us have been to these school board meetings very late at night. With that said, just a couple of more technical issues, in particular, the recess time to 8 a.m. Oftentimes we have educators and or students, and while after midnight is not an ideal time, during the school day is just not workable. I think in terms of board meetings around the state, to Assembly Member Taylor, Washoe, I believe, is usually a 2 p.m. start time. I think that might be the earliest start time in the state. Clark usually starts at 5, 6:30 here in Carson City tonight, if you want to go check out the Carson City school board meeting. And so if there can be some accommodation for action being taken, not during the school day, we would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else in Carson for opposition? Okay, seeing none in Las Vegas, do we have anyone on the line broadcast for opposition of AB 423?
Vice Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to provide opposition testimony at this time.
Okay, we will go into neutral. Anyone in Carson City for neutral on AB 423? Seeing none, we see none in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the line in neutral of AB 423?
Vice Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to provide neutral testimony at this time.
Okay, with that, we will invite Chair. No final comments, so we will recess for one minute, please. We will close the hearing on AB 423. Recess 1 minute, please.
The committee will come back to order. At this time, there are no other items on our agenda. We're going to go ahead and go into public comment. Anyone wishing to testify in public comment will be allowed 2 minutes to speak on any items that are pertaining to this committee. Is there anyone wishing to testify in public comment here in Carson City? I don't see any. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Chair, the line is open and working. There are no callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
All right, at this time, are there any committee members that have any additional remarks before we adjourn? Doesn't appear there are any, but just a couple of reminders to the committee. We will have a very, very busy week ahead of us. So tomorrow we will be meeting, we will be hearing AB 391 at 9 a.m. tomorrow in room 4100. So we'll be back in this room. We will be hearing, we will also have a pretty robust work session, so please make sure that you review that document ahead of time. I believe that agenda has already been posted now. If not, it'll be posted shortly. And at this time, the committee is adjourned.